Welcome to First Unitarian Church Summer Forum. This is our fourth in a series of 10 this Summer Forum Speaker Series. And my name is Kathy Chambliss. I'm a member of the Summer Forum Planning Committee. And I'm very happy to see all of you here today. We have a wonderful presentation today with our guest speaker, Mesa Kerge, whom I will introduce in a few minutes. You all have an order of service that describes our program for today. And we would like to start with a moment of meditation to settle our thoughts, to get ready for listening, for understanding, and for empathy, followed by our music. Thank you. Thank you, Tristan. So this morning we're very privileged, and I'm very pleased to be able to introduce our speaker today, Mesa Karagay. A little bit of background about Mesa. She was raised in California and moved to Utah in 1993. She has a degree in mathematics and teaches a minor in psychology from the University of Utah. She teaches math at Salt Lake Community College, and it might surprise you to know that Mesa teaches Zumba and yoga at local recreation centers, several of them. She's also very active in the community with volunteer work that she can talk about and describe to you in many capacities. She's the mother of 4 children, one of whom we're blessed to have with us today, Miriam, alongside her husband. They came to join her today. And she has, the other 3 are also at the University of Utah, or maybe one of them is graduated by now.
One's working on his master's, one is still working on her bachelor's, and one who's with me today will be starting in the fall. And the last one is still a senior in high school, so soon we look forward to being done.
So I think the format for today is going to be a conversation, and I will get to ask, or Mesa will respond to questions. I had an opportunity to meet her at Salt Lake Community College. I had heard about Mesa. She's on a speakers bureau, and she's very willing and very often comes to speak. In fact, she has another speaking engagement after this about living in Utah as a Muslim and her experience, her practices, and anything you want to ask about. She's very open. We sat down in a lounge at the community college and had a conversation, and I just want to encourage you at the time that we open it up for questions, you can ask her anything you want. So, first of all, we titled this Hijabs and Halal because that's something that Mesa likes to talk about, are some of the specific practices of Muslims that maybe are not commonly understood, and that she's very willing to talk about and maybe dispel some myths or misunderstandings about that. So we'll start with that, and then we'll just go to, I'll ask her some other questions. So,
thank you
Mesa,
so much.
Welcome.
Oh, sorry.
Welcome.
Thank you. So good to be here. Take over? Okay.
Please go ahead.
All right. Now I don't know what to say. But, okay. So I don't know what goes through your mind when you see a woman who wears a veil or a scarf. How many of you have a friend who is Muslim and wears a veil? How many of you have asked them why they wear the veil? 2. All right. So some people never ask and they assume things. And the biggest question I usually get is, do you wear that all the time? And I always used to wonder why people ask that. And it never even dawned on me, considering I went to Catholic school all my life. And the nuns never take their scarf off. It's true. I went to a boarding Catholic school, and they kept it on till 10 p.m. And once they went into their room, we never saw them without it. So then I understood why people asked me that question. So Muslim women only wear their scarves or veils in front of men who are not related to them. So I don't wear it in front of women, children, my husband, my father, my nephew, my son, my uncle, my grandfather, and anyone who I could never marry legally, I guess. Then I don't have to veil in front of them. It's a dress of modesty. The only Islamic requirement is that it has to cover the whole body except face, hands, and feet, and it has to be loose-fitting and not see-through. So there's no color requirement. There's no dress versus skirt versus pants versus, different cultures, different people's likes and dislikes. They can choose to wear whatever they are comfortable wearing. Women who wear a scarf, it's their choice, meaning it is required in the faith, but no one should force it upon you to wear it. So they're not being oppressed or forced to do something they don't want to do. And I would say only about 50% of the Muslim women choose to wear a scarf. The other 50% don't. So the likelihood you might know a Muslim woman is probably high, and you probably might not realize she's Muslim. A lot of our doctors happen to be Muslim here, even in Utah. At the hospital, there's a lot of Muslim doctors, and male and female. So you might know a Muslim doctor, I don't know. When do women have to start wearing a veil? Anybody know? My daughter is putting her hand up. Oh, we got another hand in the back. It'll be fun I brought my daughter because it's fun to get a different perspective, and I brought my husband so you can get a male perspective on the different questions as well later. So it'll be fun to include them into the Q&A. So it's required once a woman hits puberty, but that's not necessarily when everybody starts. I had one daughter start before puberty in 4th grade. I was against it, but my husband said, if that's when she wants to start, we're not going to force her to put it on. We're not going to force her to take it off. I personally started my senior year of high school, and my mother started the same year. So she was well in her 40s when she started, but everybody chooses to do it when they're comfortable and ready. Let's see what else on the scarf. Any questions on the scarf in particular, so I know I didn't leave something out?
So one thing that will say is that Mesa brought a whole collection of scarves that that if you would choose, you can try on, or she can show you how to wrap them in Elliott Hall after our Q&A.
Yes.
Question back there.
So one thing I want to make clear is I'm here speaking on not behalf of the 1.7 billion Muslims in the world. I'm here describing what the faith teaches or instructs. The faith says it should be a free choice, and parents should not force it on their kids, and governments should not force it on people. And so I'm speaking on behalf of the scripture. Now, what people choose to do, I have no control over. But that's a good question. Yeah, so Saudi, for example, forces the female population, whether Muslim or not, to veil in the streets. Yes?
I noticed in pictures of the Bible that long before there was any Islam, women covered their head.
That is so true. Not my specialty, but what I do know, yes, Christians and Jews, it's not a new order. And to give you a little brief history on Islam, so we don't view it that we came up with a new religion either. We view it as the continuation of the Judeo-Christian tradition. That means the same God of Abraham is the same God of Moses, is the same God of Jesus, is the same God of Muhammad. And there are many similarities between the faiths because the source is the same. Ironically, I was visiting in Syria, and I don't usually do the touristy things when I go visit, but this time I did. I was dragged to all the touristy sites, and so we went to an old church. And in that church, I found a lady who's wearing, Middle Eastern clothing, just like any other Muslim, a beautiful outfit. It was black with needle stitching, and she's in the church. I'm not the kind who likes to sit and look at stuff, so I sat and visited with her. And after a good 20 minutes of visiting with her in Arabic, I'm like, what are you doing at the church? And she looked at me, she goes, I'm a nun. I go, oh. She goes, I work here. I'm like, but you're dressed like I am. And she goes, we got it first. I said, okay. I won't argue with you. So it's, yes. So, all the pictures of Mary have her showing her with a veil on her head as well. So it's not a new practice.
So Mesa, you were talking about visiting Syria. So talk a little bit about your upbringing.
People, when I start saying where I live, they're like, was your dad in the military? I said, no, it's just life happens. I was born in Lebanon, and it just happened to be the year the war broke out, so we moved. And then we moved to Dubai, and my dad had a business in Dubai, and a few years later, his parents were getting older, and they said, you know what, we'd like you to move to Jordan and be closer to us. So he did, and so we moved to Jordan. And soon after that, my parents divorced, and luckily we were in Jordan because Grandma helped take care of me. And then I hit my teen years, and my dad goes, you know what, I don't want to deal with a teenager. So he sent me to boarding school in Cyprus. It was a good Catholic school, as good as Catholic schools can be. I don't know what your experience with Catholic schools, but boy, are the nuns tough. Anyway, 2 years of that, I wasn't the greatest child, and I got kicked out of Catholic school. So my dad said, you know, I don't want to raise a teenager either, and you don't seem to survive in Catholic school, so he sent me off to my mother. And my mother happened to be living in California. So I'm glad I was a naughty girl, because it worked out really well in the end. Stayed in California until my husband came to visit California, and we met and got married 25 years ago. And we've been in Utah, well, I've been in Utah 24 years of those 25 years. We lived in DC for 1 year, and life's been wonderful.
So talk a little bit about, you've got 4 kids. Talk a little bit about raising children as in the Muslim faith in Utah.
Well, raising kids is hard no matter what faith you are and where you live. So, but I am grateful. I have wonderful children. I do believe if you put the effort early on, it gets easier later on. Utah is a great state to raise children. It's a great family atmosphere. I mean, I don't need to preach to the choir. You guys know exactly where you live. But it can be difficult. And one of the biggest dilemmas we had to decide early on, what kind of school do we put them in? Do we go for public school, or do we go for private school? Well, when we started out, there was no Muslim school in Utah. And I decided, well, it's time to start a Muslim school in Utah. So we did. And I was the principal for 3 years. And when we started, it had preschool and kindergarten, because my oldest happened to be in kindergarten. And then each year we added a grade. And then first grade, second grade, third grade. And we really had to deal with that dilemma, because one reason I wanted them to go to public school is so others can have Muslim friends, so that we're not so foreign, not so scary, and vice versa, so that they can have friends of other faiths. So, but then I decided, no, they need to go to Muslim school, because I need them to have a strong identity and not always feel inferior or a minority. I wanted them to feel like they were normal. So we decided they went to a Muslim school, and they did great, and they were in a classroom of 5 people in a class, so their academics did really well. Great experiences. They went to high school here. They were in public high school, and awesome school. I'll put a plug for their school. It's called AIMS, Academy for Math, Engineering, and Science, which is a wonderful, wonderful charter school here in Salt Lake, which had the philosophy of inclusivity, whatever. And it really, there was no cliques in the school. Everybody loved everybody. It was a school of nerds, and it was awesome experience for them. So, and now they're up at the U and doing really well, and they played sports, they did everything. So, whether it was gymnastics, do you do gymnastics, swimming, volleyball, soccer, played piano, violin, they had a normal childhood, so it was great.
Is it required to memorize the Quran?
Required, no, at least not all of it. Some of it, yes, because the prayers, the 5 daily prayers, which are more like worship than prayer, are in the Arabic language and are reciting verses from the Quran. So even though my daughter does not speak Arabic, she does have some of the Quran memorized for that purpose.
Going back to the question about the scarf, I teach a few kids that on Muslim men when they go swimming, one girl takes off her scarf, but another girl keeps hers on. And so with your daughter doing swimming, is there this like
How old are those kids that you are teaching?
one is in fourth grade and one is in
So neither of them is really required to wear it. And so either their parents, either way, either they're choosing to do it, and if, my older daughter, when she started in fourth grade wearing her scarf, it did not resemble the way a Muslim person should wear a scarf. It included bandanas, baseball hats, t-shirts. She did not really follow what is required. But I didn't enforce it because she's not old enough, first of all, and either way I wasn't going to force her. So what they do at school sometimes might not reflect necessarily what the faith says. Because it's not a yo-yo thing. It doesn't go on and off usually. So I swim fully covered publicly.
So we're going to save some time for Q&A in a little bit.
Okay.
But we're just going to get through some questions first. So talk a little bit about your experience as a college professor, college teacher in math. When did you start working at the community college, and when did you decide to work outside the home?
I didn't really plan to work outside the home early on, but the job of principal fell into my lap because nobody else wanted it, and I wasn't wise enough to say no. And so I did that for a few years, and then when they found someone who could take over, I left the school and started renovating my house. And after a few years of renovating my house, my husband goes, find something else to do. He's like, that's expensive. And so I started first tutoring math at Salt Lake Community College, and soon figured out how to get my foot in the door and started getting my own classes. And I always loved math. It was the only constant in my educational life, because I went from continent to continent to continent, and the languages always changed. So, in Jordan, it was in Arabic, French, and English. Then you went to Cyprus, it was French, Greek, and English. Then California, it's its own language, English. But even then I struggled because, I'd spell something one way, British English, and they're like, no, that's not right. So math was the only constant. And so I did well in math, and I love teaching math, and I love seeing the light bulb go on. And it's funny, even when I teach Zumba, people walk in and they just stare at you. They don't know what to expect. It's like, can this person speak English? Is this person going to be able to teach? So I always stay silent the first few minutes of class. I let people walk in, and I just stare at them. And then we start cracking jokes, and they're like, oh, okay, good. So I have a good rapport with my students. Very few negative instances where, especially, there's quite a few students on the GI Bill. So they have PTSD. And so I've only had one student leave my class, and he said, it's not you, but I can't have, you're a trigger, and it's too hard. I go, okay, no worries. So he switched class. But you usually tell them, they're always in the very last row. They have to have their back to the wall. But never had the negative experience.
So it's important as a Muslim woman, or a devout Muslim, for you to do volunteer work in the community. Can you talk about that and what you've been doing?
I like keeping busy, doing anything and everything that presents itself. I believe in see a need, fill a need kind of philosophy, like the cartoon show, if you know which one I'm talking about. I don't know. Never mind. What show is it, Miriam? Robots. Thank you. See a need, fill a need. So in my neighborhood, I'm part of Relief Society, just because why reinvent the wheel if someone else is doing good acts I can just join in and be active. Got involved with Crossroad Urban Center. For 3 years, I sat on their board and got to know more about them. Volunteered a few years up at the UFU hospital in the capacity of a chaplain, but found out it's not my niche. My husband laughed at me when I first took it. He goes, "You're not a listener, you're a talker." And I said, "Well, we're gonna try." Yeah, it was hard. I listened for 2 years and I said, not for me. Then I volunteered out at the prison and still am for the last 5 years. Great experience. Highly recommend it. It's not so scary. Been running the Speakers Bureau a month before September 11th, so it was not a reactionary plan. It just happened that way. We just became very popular very fast. And so we've been running the Speakers Bureau since then. We average about 1 or 2 presentations a week. And it's brought me to meet a lot of people, which is really fun. And, what else do we do? Currently very active with the refugees. Anything they need, they call. I used to work for, I still work for them, but they don't call anymore. I used to be an interpreter for Salt Lake District and Granite District, but now there's a dime a dozen. There's so many people who speak Arabic. I'm not in demand anymore. So, but anything they need, I just post it on my Facebook page, and people just say, "Oh, I have an old TV, I have an old vacuum, I have this, I have that," and I go pick it up and deliver it to whoever needs it. So if you want to friend me on Facebook, be happy. Women only, sorry, I have this thing about not friending men on my Facebook page. So women only, don't have hurt feelings if you don't get friended. And we can be part of a big family community to help others.
So one question I've always been very curious about is how you fast during Ramadan, especially during the summer hours when the days are so long, and try to maintain a reasonable lifestyle the rest of your life beside just going to bed. I can't imagine how being hungry and thirsty during the hot summer days, how you can carry on a life.
I don't know either. Outside Ramadan, it's really a challenge. There is something about the month of Ramadan. God somehow makes it doable. Either because everybody else is doing it or because God facilitates it for you, because I have some days to make up from Ramadan, and I can't seem to make time to make them up right now because I'm like, the day is long. So fasting is from dawn till sunset, and yes, in winter, sunset is much earlier, so I'm waiting for winter to make up my missed day. And I'm surprised too because I can't diet. It is so hard to diet, but I can fast. And so we get up early in the morning, around 3:30 in the morning, have an early breakfast, nothing huge, just something wise, not donuts. That is not a wise decision. And then once 4:15 hits or whenever dawn starts, you stop and you just tell your stomach to go to sleep. And the hunger pains come, but they do go away. But let me tell you, just like dieting, if you feed that stomach even a spoonful, it will start wanting more and more and more. But if you keep it asleep, you're like, nope, there's no food. It will just, the hunger pains come and go. Honestly, the hardest thing in Ramadan is lack of sleep for Muslims, from a physical sense, and water, if you are not wise. So I give up Zumba and yoga and exercise during Ramadan. I still go to work, I still teach. So talking too much while fasting is not a good idea, but you do what you have to do. Sometimes you come home and take a nap. But then the reason the lack of sleep is because if you break fast at 9 p.m., Now you have a full stomach. And no, you don't get to eat too much. You think you want to eat. You fill a plate, but we say your eyes are bigger than your stomach because your stomach shrinks. So you have your first dinner at 9 p.m. And then maybe some people will later snack. But then we do a lot of prayers in Ramadan. And the late prayers start at 10:30 p.m. And they might finish around 11:30 p.m. or midnight if you go to the mosque by the time you come home. And you barely fall asleep, then get back up at 3:30 in the morning to eat, and then prayers in the morning. So it gets tough, challenging. I don't know how many of you read, what's her name? Peggy Fletcher's comments on her either blog or the articles she wrote for the Tribune. But Peggy has been fasting Ramadan for the past 5 or 6 years. And it's interesting because the first few years, she chose when her Ramadan was. So she always chose it to be February, and which is fine. She goes, I want to experience the fast. So she did. She fasted in February. And then each year, she would up the ante. She goes, what else do you do in Ramadan? So the second year, I told her, well, we read the scripture. We try to read the whole Quran during the month of Ramadan. So she took that challenge, and she completed reading the whole Quran in the month of Ramadan. I'm like, wow. Then the following year, she goes, what else do you do in Ramadan? I said, we pray in addition to our 5 daily prayers. So she goes, I'm going to try at least pray those 5 daily prayers. I should have explained to her how our 5 daily prayers work, because her boss told me, he goes, she sits by that clock waiting for the time of prayer so she doesn't miss prayer. And I'm like, oh. Doesn't work that way. Okay, so we have 5 daily prayers, and so like the first prayer, let's say, starts around 1 o'clock and ends at 5:30. She thought you had to pray at 1 o'clock. No, I can pray at any time between 1 and 5:30, and then the next prayer goes from 5:30 till 8 p.m. and then 8 till 9 and then 9 till. So there's windows of time for each prayer. Then the following year, she goes, so what else makes Ramadan special? I said, well, there's this quote that says, some people, all they get out of Ramadan is thirst and hunger. And she goes, what does that mean? I said, it's more than about not eating and not drinking. It's about not saying bad language and not losing your temper, and about not doing sins in Ramadan. And she goes, oh. That year, her husband came to me and said, thank you. She is so calm now. She used to be angry, and now she's so calm. I don't know what the trick was. I said, it is a trick of the mind. You just tell the mind, you can't be angry. And somehow it reminds you to go, especially when kids are involved. You're like, And this year, she goes, this year actually, to give her credit, she fasted it in June. Just like us. And she said it was a lot harder. But like I told you at the very beginning, it's amazing. It's doable. She goes, I didn't think I can do it, but I did it. So she survived. Her church is so amazing. This Ramadan, I think this is the first year ever the churches opened their doors and did an iftar for combined. So they chose the Sunday they were fasting on. And they invited us to their church, and we had dinner together. So there was about 200 Muslims and maybe 150 LDS, and they all sat together, and we all broke fast together, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And you probably got more about Ramadan than you wanted, but.
Thank you very much. One thing I would like you to comment on is, in fact, how I heard about you was from another member of our congregation who went to the mosque in Sandy for one of the Friday night open houses. And apparently this started after the November election, last November. And your mosque decided to, let's open it up and start engaging with people, because people are curious. We want to get to know them, and they us. And so you were part of that. So can you talk about that?
So this is how wonderful Utah is. I mean, we had open houses in the past, but they were a once a year event, and we advertise and a few people come, and but people were contacting me saying, we want to show support. How can we show your community support? We want to come to the mosque and show support. So I contacted the imam, and I'm like, they want to come, and he's like, but it's like almost Christmas. They're busy. I'm like, no, they want to come. And this was on a Wednesday. All we did was make an event and put it on Facebook. We didn't do any other advertising on a Wednesday. And we said it's going to be on Friday. Friday came, 350 people showed up. And we're like, okay. We were so unprepared. But that was the best program we had out of all of them, because it was unrehearsed, it was sincere, it was open mic, it was very fun. We had some interesting incidents. I don't know if you want me to share how much time we have. We're good? So that night was so fun. First, my sister-in-law came, who doesn't usually come to the mosque with us, and she sees someone, and they just immediately embraced. They were high school friends, haven't seen each other in 25 years. And so that was a small moment, in time. We're like, okay, that's really neat. Then a lady, we had open mic, and she comes up and says, I don't know how you guys are doing it. You guys have a target on your back, and yet you open your doors. You keep thanking us for coming, but we're here to thank you for opening your doors and showing us how it's done. I'm like, I was looking at her going, I don't know what she's talking about, but okay. Later on in the conversation, I go to talk to her, and she's like, oh, and this is my wife. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it. But I didn't see why she had a target on her back, and she's like, she was scared from the new Trump era coming, and she goes, I don't know, how are you not scared? I said, well, I believe in God, and God has a purpose and a reason for everything, and thanks to Trump, we're getting to becoming a more loving community and more getting together and supporting each other. I mean, it's really brought us together. I don't know if you have felt it. I mean, there's bad, but there's a lot of good that is coming out of it too, and I'm hoping there'll be more good coming out of it. And then we had one negative guy get up and kind of, we give the mic to whoever wants it, and he goes, you guys have rage in your heart. And we're like, no, I don't. He goes, yes, you do. And I'm like, he goes, how do you deal with the rage in your heart? I said, we open our doors. And he goes, no. So he was adamant that we have rage in our heart. So the lady who embraced my sister-in-law at the very beginning, she gets up and takes the mic. And she says, I had rage in my heart. I was in the Twin Towers on September 11. I survived. But I knew not to have rage in my heart against Muslims because I had Muslim friends. And I did not blame all the Muslims for the act. But I did have rage in my heart. And the way I dealt with my rage is I went and adopted children from Africa, and she had her children with her. And it was a beautiful moment. So we had all these beautiful moments with the open mic. Then we had this one kid come up. He was the last to speak that evening, and it was so beautiful. So he comes up, he has long black hair, black beard, a couple of piercings, a little tattoo here and there. And as he's walking up, he's looking at me like this. And I'm just looking at him like, why is he staring at me? And as he comes up closer, he goes, do you recognize me? And I'm like, so then he takes the mic and he says his name, and I'm like, oh, I recognize you. And he's like, he was my Sunday school student, and many years ago. He's all grown up and different than he was as a child. And he goes, I am from an M&M family. Anybody know what's an M&M family? Muslim Mormon family. He says, my father is a devout Muslim. My mother is a devout Mormon. And if these two people can love each other as much as they do, then there's hope for everybody else. And so it was really beautiful. I told them, you don't realize I use you as an example all the time. I said, not just after that comment, I said, for kids who complained about whatever, I said, you went to seminary Monday through Friday to please your mother. You went to Friday prayers to please your dad. You went to church on Sunday to please your mother. And then you came to Sunday school to please your dad. And I had him in Sunday school. I'm like, wow, talk about a kid who had to do double duty, if not more, for the sake of both religions. And so it was a beautiful evening, and that was just one out of many. So the mosque, after that night, ended up doing open house every single night, every single Friday night for a few months. And we kept thinking the numbers are going to dwindle. Every Friday we'd have 300 people. So it was amazing, never dwindled. But after a while, we're like, we need a break. So we're down to the last Friday of each month. We still do an open house, and we still get about 200 people. So you're all welcome to come. As we tell everybody, our doors are always open. You don't need an invitation to come on a specific Friday. We have a program every Friday evening, but if you want the rehearsed program with a Q&A and good dessert, then come on the open house night.
Where?
Sandy Mosque, it's on 90th South, 213 West, or 217 West. That big at-home that just opened, it's the first door west of it. It's a tiny little door that says Utah Islamic Center.
So I think it's a good time for us to take a brief break and pass the plate. Oh, yeah.
During the play or not?
Let's, she has some music to play while we're passing the plate. That's perfect.
Perfect.
So, yeah, we'll ask, and, we'll have the offering, and then we'll have Q&A. But Mesa brought some
They say,
music.
oh poor girl, you're so beautiful, you know. It's a shame that you cover up your beauty so. She just smiles and graciously responds reassuringly. This beauty that I have is just a simple part of me. This body that I have, no stranger has a right to see. These long clothes, the shawl I wear, ensure my modesty. Faith is more essential than fashion, wouldn't you agree? This hijab, this mark of piety, is an act of faith, a symbol for all the world to see. A simple cloth to preserve her dignity. So lift the veil from your heart to see the heart of purity. They tell her, girl, don't you know this is the West and you are free. You don't need to be oppressed, ashamed of your femininity. She just shakes her head and she speaks so assuredly. See the billboards and the magazines that line the checkout aisles with their phony painted faces and their airbrushed smiles. Well, their sheer clothes and low-cut gowns, they are really not for me. You call it freedom, and I call it anarchy in this hijab. This mark of piety is an act of faith, a symbol for all the world to see. A simple cloth to preserve her dignity. So lift the veil from your heart to see the heart of purity. Lift the veil from your heart to see the heart of purity. Lift the veil
The song reminded me I left a very important fact out about the veil. So the two reasons why Muslim women cover is one is modesty, and the other is to be identifiably Muslim, even though it's not popular in the US right now to be Muslim, but it's to be identifiably Muslim. So if I see someone else wearing a veil, I know they're Muslim without even knowing who they are, what they are. And I have done it often. If I'm driving and I see someone veiled on the side of the road, I'll stop and offer them a ride and talk to them and see if they're new in town or if they need help or if I see them in the grocery store. It brings us together without knowing each other. So there is something to it. When I lived in Holland for a year, it was awesome to be able to have others identify me and say, help, I don't know where anything is. So, and they'll say, come over for dinner, or do you know where the mosque is, or different things. Yes.
Misa, thank you.
Tim is going to pass the microphone.
Right. And we'll try to alternate across the aisle, okay? So, microphone.
I was curious as to how you felt about the ban of the hijab in France.
Husband, do you want to take the question? Okay, come on up here. I still want you to take the question.
Thanks. It's in.
I'm the kid, I can stand.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I can stand. I'm the kid.
Just bring that one over, Mariam. I think most Muslims were shocked by it, and it's a strange thing. I was reading about David McCullough's book on John Adams, and John Adams said back then when he was an ambassador, France, he says, a nation of 18 million atheists. What's to become of it? He couldn't believe the direction. When we lived in Europe, it was becoming more and more secular. People would know me, then get to know the family, and of course, I kind of fit in either way. But then they would say, "What, Sammy? You're a Muslim? You believe in, a supreme creator of the universe and things? I thought you were normal." All of a sudden, a whole different view. And when coming to the question on the hijab in France, imagine that they take it as something that's not a personal liberty. All that talk of freedom, egalitarian, liberty, fraternity, and a woman's covering is a threat to them. They don't want that choice to even exist. So in certain public spheres, government jobs, in now beaches, they don't, they've banned it. And you wonder, it's like, well, that's really interesting. Dr. Ali Mazruri, who had a program called The Africans, do you remember on PBS? There was this series called The Africans, and he's a professor from, Africa. We went to a lecture that he had given, and he said, it's interesting, you can look at civilizations and women's dress. Europeans were obsessed with how women clothe themselves. When the Europeans went to South Africa, women weren't wearing, they're wearing just clothes on the bottom. They were half-dressed, savages. We must civilize them by putting more clothes on the women. And that's South Africa. What happened when they went to North Africa? Muslim countries, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria. Women are fully covered. Savages, too much clothes. They have to civilize them by removing clothes and deading it down. Well, European beaches are topless, like South Africa. But South Africans were not considered to be civilized like them. And then you go to the north, where they're fully covered, like Mary, mother of Jesus, uncivilized, because again, that's not their norm. So unfortunately, I think there's a lot of projection of people and, to not really accept others until they adopt their ways.
It's been such a gift to hear you today. I want to thank you. It's just been wonderful. I want to ask a practical question about, we have 4 seasons in Utah. And so do you find that I'm a skier, for example, would you wear your veil made out of wool if you were going skiing, or are there different fabrics that you use, or are there some rules about that?
Skiing is wonderful. We all look the same when we're on the ski slopes. Winter is wonderful because then I'm not too hot. But there's something about being clothed. I mean, it does get hot if you're standing in the sun under the heat, but really, if someone goes in the desert, the worst thing they can do is go in shorts and a t-shirt. They need to be layered so they don't dehydrate. What's that show? Arabia, Lawrence of Arabia. You know, when he was there, he covered because he found it. People do it for a reason. It helps. So, not to really like what Saudis do, but when I went to Saudi for the Hajj, I told myself I would never, ever, ever cover my face. Oh, I did for really practical reasons. The exhaust fumes from the cars were awful, so I used it as a mask in the end to survive. But really, people know who live in a certain environment what's the best thing to wear. Light-covered cotton fabrics are better for summer, white colors versus dark colors, and luckily we have AC almost everywhere. So people usually ask me, especially when I teach Zumba, isn't it hot to teach Zumba fully covered? And the answer is it can be. Luckily, most of the rec centers have ACs and fans and things, but it's really easier to teach Zumba with a veil than without a veil. And I discovered that when I started teaching at Curves for a while, and in Curves I didn't have to wear a veil because it was women only. I didn't have something to catch my sweat anymore, and I was dripping like crazy, and then I go for my sleeve, and I didn't have a sleeve because I was wearing a tank top, and I'm like, oh, this is miserable. And then women are vain, and I was vain, and I started caring about how I looked, and I would spend a lot of time fixing my hair before I went to teach, only to get sweaty. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I went back to putting my scarf even at Curves. I'm like, I don't need this. It's too much work. So there's a cute book on the table in there, 101 reasons why I wear a scarf, or is it funny reasons I wear a scarf, or what was it? Anyway, it's a cartoon book. The scarf is handy in so many different ways. You can tuck your cell phone in, hands-free. There's so many things. It's helpful. Who has the mic?
Oh, yes. I'd like to add my thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts, and congratulations to you and both of you for what you've done, for what you do for this community, and also for having educated your children so well. My question is in the days when the Muslim religion was created, it was probably pretty much an agrarian society when people would have to work more in the summer. So why do they put Ramadan in the summer and not in the winter when they're shorter months?
Well, Ramadan is not in the summer or the winter. Muslims follow a lunar calendar, so it moves every year by 10 days. And really, in Saudi, it doesn't matter if it's summer or winter. They're on the equator, and summer or winter, their sunset is roughly the same time. So, but it's interesting because this way, one half of the globe is not stuck in summer, and one half of the globe is not stuck in winter. It's constantly rotating. It takes 33 years to go through the whole time thing. So we will slowly be creeping into May, and then April, and then we'll have I don't know how many years, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 years of winter, and then we'll have to hit summer again.
Is there an English translation of the Quran that you would recommend? It would be interesting to know whether there is an English translation that is accurate.
I'll let my husband answer half the question. I'm going to put a plug in there's an app for everything. The iQuran is free to download. And what's neat about it, it has, 5 English translations, let alone Indonesian, German, French, Spanish, Turkish, Bosnian, Urdu, Farsi, Dutch, and a whole Japanese, Chinese, a whole bunch, all for free. But anyway, and it's neat because if one translation didn't click with me, I would go to another translation and see what another translator tried to say. And I do speak Arabic and I do understand Arabic, but even then, it can get tricky, whereas I have to say the iQuran online on the phone does not come with commentary. And the most important thing, if you really want to study the Quran in detail, is you need a Quran with commentary, because a verse can be taken out of context, and the commentary puts it in context. Why was that verse revealed? What was going on? What is it? So you don't want things to be taken out of context.
Yeah, and there's a new one called the Clear Quran. I haven't read it, but I heard good things about it, so that might be one I would suggest. The Clear Quran, a thematic English translation. There's also another one which my wife is mentioning by Muhammad Asad, A-S-A-D, which has lots of explanations, because you'll read just the transliteration, well, the translation of the sentence, but then you're like, but as she mentioned, what's the context? To whom is it applicable? What was meant? And then underneath there's footnotes. And the footnotes are huge. I mean, there's so much time spent on explaining these things.
Hi, thanks for joining us. My question is about LGBT rights. Would you talk a little bit about how that's handled in the Islam faith? It's my understanding that gay marriage is not performed there. And so my question is there, among the Muslims in the communities, is there an internal struggle like there is in certain Christian faiths? Like, there are people wanting to change the Mormon faith to accept gay marriage. There are people in the not Episcopalian, but other Christian faiths wanting to change that. Is there the movement there with the members, or is it united one way or another? Thank you.
Okay, so the question is about LGBT. Of course, it depends what Muslim you talk to. Honestly, it's based on interpretation to some extent. I have to admit, I'm more on the liberal side. So, but from my understanding of the faith, I'm not giving my own opinion, I do view it as a sin. But just like anything else, man is sinful. I'm not perfect, nobody's perfect. And Islam is a relationship between one and God. So to me, my biggest surprise was once I happened to be at an interfaith function, and we're all introducing ourselves of what faith we are, and one gal goes, well, I'm Mormon, but I can't say I'm Mormon. I'm looking at her, explain? She goes, well, I've been excommunicated. And I'm like, explain? If you claim to be Mormon, how could someone say you're not? Because that's so foreign to me. If someone says I'm Muslim, I can't say he's not. So, comes with its baggage, because, people go, is Osama bin Laden going to hell? And I'm like, I can't answer that. Is Hitler going to hell? I can't answer that either. It's not up to me to decide that. God decides that. So to me, it was such a foreign concept. How could one human say, you're not of that faith? And how could one human decide you're going to hell or not? So there are Muslims who are gay or different things. The Islamic philosophy is, if you have a weakness, whatever it is, or a sin, you shouldn't publicize it. It's between you and God. Your sin is between you and God. So if you have a weakness for alcohol and you drink, you shouldn't drink it openly and proudly. You stay in the closet, so to speak. Okay. Does that answer your question?
I still see questions, and we have a question right here.
My question for all of you, first, thank you so much for coming. But I'd like to hear from each of you, what's your favorite part about your faith?
I'm not ready. I'm still thinking to see what you
say. Mine is the one-on-one relationship with God. Nobody can tell me, but I have a strong personality, so I have really thick skin. Nobody can say anything to really get under my skin. So
That's a very important part. I think we forget. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, introspectively, I've never thought about that. But like my wife said, what would the alternative be? And I guess you're right. I mean, it's a direct relationship. I remember my dad telling me since, youth, it's you and God. There's no intermediaries. There's no one between. We have no hierarchy in Islam. It doesn't matter. Those titles of Sheikh, Mullah, whatever, Imam, those are academic titles. Somebody went to their theological school, seminary, and has a degree in it. But that person would never presume to say he's closer to God than the humblest person, the janitor or the person who sweeps the floors or vacuums the mosque. Nobody would ever presume to say they're better than him. In fact, it's usually the opposite. You think more of the people in lesser position that they're probably more spiritual. It's a big challenge to remain spiritual when you have plenty. The Prophet Muhammad said, I don't worry for my nation when you're without. I worry when you have plenty. That's a challenge. But I think that's the camaraderie. It's also a logical sense. There is nothing that contradicts science in the Quran. I don't have any debate about the age of the world or creations or, any of the hot topics of today. Those don't exist. I asked my dad, when we were kids, and I'm not putting down anything. Anybody can believe in what they want, of course. But like I said, Dad, where did all the water go after the world was flooded? He goes, what are you talking about? I said, the whole world flooded. He goes, who said the whole world was flooded? I'm like, I thought everybody knew that. He didn't know it because he wasn't raised here. He's from Kurdistan, northern Iraq. He goes, no, God said there was a flood. Nothing said it was the entire world. So then there's no having to explain how did all the water come, where did all the water go, all the animals and thousands of species, things like that, age of rocks being billions of years, or the creation being, that's all fine. That's all fine. So that makes it really easy in Islam to accept everything else when you don't find an open contradiction to what you've been taught from science.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready. So if I remember, the question was, what was your favorite part about your religion? Yay? Nay? So about my faith, all right. So it's really helped define me, just a bit. I'll go to school and I'll be in humanities class, and I thought I was pretty liberal. I'm pretty open-minded, because for me, I've always believed it's, between you and God. So everyone, your decisions don't impact me, my decisions don't impact you. It's kind of like it's your choice to do whatever it is that you want to do. So I thought I was really, decently liberal until I went in there, and it's like, wow, I'm actually pretty conservative compared to everyone else. But it's something that I've enjoyed. It's kind of helped me be who I am. I like wearing my scarf, and I do a lot of sports. And if you've seen volleyball players and their required outfit of Spanx, I am so glad I wear pants, because it covers everything that I don't want anyone else to see. So, I don't know. It does. I don't get stuck. It's so cool. It's kind of just helped me be who I am. I don't have to worry about boys because I don't have to date. There's no really dating in Islam. There's dating for the sake of marriage, and that's not what people do in high school, so I don't even have to worry about boys. Like, they're not on my mind. Like, yeah, cool. I don't go to dances. I don't do different things, and I really like that. People look at me and they go, yeah, I'm not asking her to the dance. I know she's just going to say no. So it's like, sweet, I don't have to deal with that. It's helped me be who I am. I have different morals and ethics, and it's really concrete, and people know what they are, more or less. Like, people don't ask me to do certain things, or they don't really question, like, why aren't you wearing Spanx? It's like, really? I wear pants. You've always seen me wear pants. I'm never going to wear Spanx. Or, I don't know, it's been nice. My religion has helped me be who I am, and it has helped me academically. I'm never thinking about boys or any of those issues. I don't deal with drama, and I don't know. It's helped me be who I am as a person. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Miriam.
You've spoken about some of the things that you find personally advantageous in terms of wearing your veils and so forth, identifying other Muslim women only, because men don't wear veils. So my question is, what is the spiritual belief behind the difference in the sexes and the fact that there are no restrictions, or at least none that I know of, on male dress? Certainly in some religions there are restrictions for both, like the Hasids. So why the difference, and how does that fit into, I guess, your life and your belief system?
So I did not cover any of the women's rights topics in our lecture today, but I did bring a handout called Women's Rights in Islam. Women in Islam are so elevated. They were given so many rights that they never had to fight for. Even in the US, women are still fighting for some of those rights. So, I mean, I can go through all the list of rights, but men have it much harder than we do, Islamically speaking. The veil has its positives, even though we're identifiable. Like my daughter said, she doesn't have to deal with that peer pressure. People around me change their language immediately. They don't use bad language. Nobody's gonna offer me drugs or alcohol. They know it's not something I'm gonna do. So all that negative peer pressure is gone. The men don't have that. They really have to work hard about standing for their faith, and I actually should let you answer that question yourself. But women have the right to their money. Their income is their income. They are always financially being taken care of. If they live under their parents' household, the father is required to take care of his daughter. Once the daughter gets married, her husband has to financially be responsible for her. If she has a job and earns money, she pockets that money. It doesn't go to paying the house bills and those things. She can invest it any way she wants. If her father passes away, she inherits. She gets a chunk. It's guaranteed in Islam. It's not, he can write his will to his pet or his friend or to whoever he wants. Every child gets a share. Some people will point out and say, hey, the brother gets double the sister. That is true. If there's no brothers, the sisters get equal shares. If there's only one daughter, she gets pretty much the whole pie. But if there's a brother, if the girl is not married and her father just passed away, who do you think is financially responsible for her now? Her brother. Yeah, he got a bigger share, but he just inherited a big commitment to take care of his sister for quite a while. So Islam has to be looked at in a full picture and not taking bits and pieces of it. But men have dress codes too.
And also, these rules came about over 1,400 years ago. This was in an age in Arabia where women had no rights, were considered property, where they didn't have anything, where the practices then in pagan Arabia were horrific. And it came saying they have these rights. They have the rights to their money. They have the right to inheritance. They have the right to their possessions. All of these things. How long ago, like I said, what is the rule for anyone here? If Leona Helmsley decides she's going to leave money to her, a pet, is there any court in the world that would say, oh, you can't do that? Children here don't have that. We have some relatives who are non-Muslims as well. And one of them, there's the dad was an auto executive, retired down to Asheville, North Carolina, has a fly-in and you can fly in and out of their place, and a golf cart in and out. And the daughter is struggling. We're like, how come? They said, well, the dad left it all to one grandkid who had special needs, and his other daughter got nothing, and nobody else got anything. So is that equitable and fair? I guess in Europe at the time when Islam came, oldest born son gets everything. Second born, nothing. So Islam has, like I said, these rules came over 1,400 years ago, which gave rights to people that never had it.
Thank you again for coming. It's been a pleasure. To give a little context to my question, as part of the curriculum for religious education here at the Unitarian Church, we teach the youth about other religions. Junior high class, we taught, of course, a little bit about Islam, and then we visited the mosque in West Valley City, the Khadija. Yeah. Had a great experience, good presentation. The director of the mosque identified as Sufi and said, Islam was one of many paths to salvation or to God. But as we left, we got a pamphlet, and reading that, the youth were a little confused because it said Islam was the only path. Just your thoughts, personally, or...
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I wish you all were at the Marmalade Library yesterday. They had a guest speaker talking about this, topics of Islam and translation. Do you remember the exact? Okay.
Well, I don't know if I remember the exact verse, but it's interesting because you said the only path is Islam, and it depends on translating the word Islam. What does the word Islam mean? Anybody know? What? Surrender. So many verses in the Quran, it depends on who translates them. If it says only the Muslim going to heaven, Muslim is the person who surrenders. And so the guy yesterday who was giving the presentation was quoting multiple verses in the Quran, and one of them was clear. It says the Jew, the Christian, anybody who surrenders, it's up to God to decide where they end up. So God is the ultimate judge. The one sin in Islam that is unforgivable is to associate partners with God, and it depends on how you look at that. Is it worshiping somebody other than God? Is it giving someone else an equal status to God, whether it's money or whatever? So it all depends on translation and how you interpret something. I personally, again, I do know some Muslims who will be on one area and say, no, you have to be of the religion of Islam to enter heaven. And some will say, you have to be a good, decent person who surrenders to God and does what God wants him to do. It depends on interpretation. Do you want to add anything?
Well, again, it's been wonderful having all of you here. I wonder if you could say a bit about the other part of the title, halal. I'll just say personally, I'm all about animal cruelty, and I wonder if buying halal meat is a way for me to make sure that the animal was well treated, or is it just simply there's a prayer said over it, and who cares what happens to the animal?
No, that's a great point. And even again, when people didn't have rights at the time Islam came, there were rights given to animals. There were rights given to nature. There was rights given to everything. And halal, you're right. It's not just a prayer. It's a process. As the animal, how was it treated before? How was it conditioned? A slaughterhouse in the Muslim countries are to be done right. That one animal cannot witness the others being slaughtered. That would be considered cruel, and that violates the rule of halal. You cannot, literally, line them up like that. And it has to be at ease and peaceful. And I've seen even a YouTube of a person showing how he recites things, how calm and this and a lamb. In the end, you are still, taking the life of an animal. We believe that God has given sustenance to man for plants and animals alike, but that has to be respected. In a humane way. The knife has to be sharp. There has to be all these things. The suffering has to be absolutely minimal. And some people will believe, they say that there's a difference in the meat, that when you have an animal as calm versus something that is in an adrenaline shock, fight or flight mode being slaughtered. So that's a great question, yes. Thank you so much for having us. And I think I need to explore some more things about the Unitarian Church. On PBS, the documentary about Isaac Newton, found out he said he was Unitarian, which people didn't realize at the time. And then just a day or yesterday or 2 days ago, Thomas Jefferson, and in presidential election, and him being slandered as not being religious enough, and all of these things, you know, being played the religious card against him in politics, and again said Unitarian. And they said he believed everybody eventually would be in this country. So those are two figures who I really respect. I'm going to have to find out. Thank you.
We'll conclude by having one final piece from Tristan. Thank you.